What makes a wine great? That's our question today. We're trying to decode and decipher what makes a wine exceptional versus average. The Real Review have released their classification for this year, and they classify the best wines in the country. What makes these wines better? The Vino Geek Podcast, wine from a Kiwi perspective.
Thinking about Europe, Asia, or that once-in-a-lifetime adventure you've been dreaming about? Travel is happening right around the world, and now is a fantastic time to start planning. Picture yourself wandering through the streets of Paris, cruising the rivers of Europe, exploring the temples of Asia, or relaxing on a tropical beach in Bali. Whether you're looking to travel this year or take advantage of early bird specials for next year, Amanda and Anna from King Travel would love to help you bring those travel dreams to life. Book local, book with confidence. Visit kingtravel.co.nz.
So what makes a wine better than the rest? What makes it stand out? What is the quality markers that means the Real Review would make it an exceptional wine, to put it in their top tier? What are things that we should be looking at in order to know if something's of exceptional quality, as opposed to just being overpriced? Because let's face it, there's a lot of wines out there that command a very high price, but are they worth it? Are they actually worth that price? Is that price inflated because of other reasons other than quality? It's a very real question, and this is a question that needs to be answered. In Burgundy and even Champagne, the mark of the quality of the wine is not necessarily the wine itself. It's actually the fruit, where the fruit is grown, the specific vineyards that the wine comes from. That is what determines whether the wine is good or great, is where it's grown. It's got nothing to do with who makes the wine, how the wine is made. It's where the grapes are grown, because at the end of the day, if you have amazing fruit, you can make amazing wine. But if you have crap fruit, you can't make good wine. It just does not happen. You have to have good fruit to make good wine. So to make exceptional wine, you need exceptional fruit. So if you can get exceptional fruit from an exceptional vineyard, then you're 90% of the way there to making an exceptional wine. Where the likes of Bordeaux is a little bit different. They actually, and this is something that probably needs to be updated now. 1855 is when they actually did this classification. Sure, in Saint-Emilion, a little side enclave of Bordeaux, they have a whole separate structure for what is quality, and they do review it more regularly than the rest of Bordeaux. However, the 1855 classification is where they classified these chateaux, and it was, they say it was based on the quality of the wine. Who knows what kind of backhand deals and dodgy things were done in order to make sure that your chateau got a higher tier on the classification, regardless of the fact it's done on producer. It's done based on that producer. So the wines in Bordeaux, if you want to, the very, very best are the ones in the top tier of that classification, and it will never change. They're the most expensive. They're the ones you have to pay the most for, regardless of the quality of the wine. Again, it's with, traditionally speaking in France, it's all about either where it's growing or who's making it, not necessarily the wine itself. That's a big minefield. Obviously, the whole adage, you trust those producers to make good wines. But, it's still the producer that in Bordeaux that is marked first, rather than the quality of the wine. You just have to back and in that the wine is quality. How does this translate to New Zealand? Now, again, the Real Review classification system, great setup, a great tool to use too. I mean, unfortunately, it is behind a paywall, which hurts a little bit, but it means it's not accessible to the public. But the big thing for them is consistency over a time. It has to have scored exceptionally well for a decade. That's how it should be. Should show that this producer or this wine is exceptional year in, year out, regardless of what's happening. Because at the end of the day, stability is what you want. Stability in the vineyard, stability in the winery. Sure, you're going to have those odd vintages where it's not good, especially in Hawke's Bay. They've had a few, Gisborne, which those wines obviously don't get produced in those years, but most of the time it's not up to the environment, and if it is, then you just don't make it, especially that exceptional tier. You don't want to be sullying your good name by producing something that's from an inferior vintage. Again, going back to the fruit quality. If the fruit quality is good, then the wine is going to be good. There's no point in trying to sugarcoat and say, oh yeah, it was a very poor vintage, and because of that, across the board, the fruit quality is not good. But we made the best wine we possibly, the best wine ever. We made an exceptional wine. There is exceptions to this, and although I haven't experienced it firsthand, Te Mata produces Coleraine every single year. I haven't tasted it in its poorer years because why would I want to? It's a lot of money for something produced in a poorer year. And you can taste that in wines, especially Cabernet. You can taste that the wine has been produced in poorer years. And while this is not really where I was going with this, I will keep going. Because it's important, you should know this, that I have talked about this before, where vineyard conditions, the vintage conditions have a huge impact on the overall taste and quality of the wine. Sure, quality is hard to quantify. Some people will still regard wine that's not necessarily one of the producer's better wines as quality just because it's from that producer and they know that they make wines of quality, likes of Coleraine, produced in 2023, Cyclone Gabrielle. Anybody else would not produce that wine, but they do. Now, the wine will show the effects of that, of the cyclone, because it cannot. There's no physical way you can produce a wine from a poor vintage and it doesn't show that it's from a poor vintage. Even in Bordeaux, even the best producers of Bordeaux, if they make a wine from a poorer year, you can taste it. And the prices actually reflect that. So in Bordeaux, each year the wines are reviewed before release, and that gives them a ballpark of the release price. So if the year across the board was okay, they can get a reasonable price. If it's an exceptional year, they can push the price up. If it's a poor year, they have to drop the price because the price reflects the quality of the wine and the vintage that was produced. So coming back, you can taste the difference. They tend to be a little bit thinner, slightly sort of weedy, especially reds, and they just don't have that same fullness and breadth in the wine. They are a little bit thinner, a little bit more, they don't have it all together. They're missing, they're lacking a little bit extra, and that's that extra bit of hang time on the vines. Maybe they had to be picked a little bit early, or just a little bit diluted, or any number of things. They just didn't reach the physiological ripeness that they need to in order to produce a great wine. And so, yes, average producers can produce a great wine in a great year, but rule of thumb is if you want a great wine that will last, or just a seriously good wine, the producer has to be making the wine, and it has to be from a really good year. So you find exceptional years, you find an exceptional producer. And it is what I try to do. When I'm selecting the wines at Lionel's, there is different wines where I'll pick the wine specifically because of that producer and that vintage. I am a huge fan of a cooler vintage in Central Otago, which is a 2017 vintage. Not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but I love it. And so whenever I get the opportunity to list the wine from that year, I will list it because the wines are exceptional to me. But each to their own. Again, and this is another thing. When it comes to what makes a wine exceptional, it is personal preference. It is up to you. It is very individual. There might be some wines in the Real Reviews classification that I just don't agree with. But that's their call. They are the Real Review. They have more experience in their little toe than I have in my whole body, when it comes to wine. So I'm not going to criticize them and say that they're wrong. It's just not who I would pick, And there's other producers that I think are amazing, but they'll just laugh at me and think, yeah, that's not exceptional. That doesn't hold a candle to this. And you too, you'll have wines out there that you absolutely adore. You think it's the best thing ever. But for me, I think, how can you like that? It's not good. There's flaws to it or what have you, and we all have a different lens. And this is the thing about wine. The beauty of wine, and the reason why there is so many different wines out there, is because we all are individual. We all have our own individual tastes. We all have our own preferences. What we feel is makes a wine great versus not so good. And that's important. That's the beauty. One of the most beautiful factors of wine is that, we can all find a wine that we like. If we all like wine initially, I will put a caveat in there, because there's people out there, and we all know them, that no matter how much they try, they just cannot get into wine because wine just does not do it for them, and that's fine. That's them. But for us, ones that do like wine, we need to work out what we like. We need to just road test that against these experts, against these people, against me. Taste the wines that I rate highly, and make a determination for yourself. One thing that I worked out years ago is that the two top wine reviewers in the world are Jancis Robinson and Robert Parker. Now, I worked out really quickly that I didn't necessarily agree with Robert Parker's reviews as such. I didn't enjoy the wines that he reviewed highly, yet I agreed quite wholeheartedly with Jancis Robinson. And so I tended to lean more towards Jancis and her interpretation of wines and her reviews of wines, because they were more closely aligned to what I look at for wine. And so that was a big thing too, is, once you work out, it could be that you like the wines that I like. So you're going to follow my wines of the week going, oh yeah, you gave that 5 stars, that's got to be a good wine. Yet others might go, oh no, I'm not really a fan of his, but Sam Kim, whenever he gives a high rating, I really like that. And so you follow what you like. And it could be that you like Robert Parker. This is quite good when I was at the Merchant myself, preferring Jancis Robinson, but then Floris, who's the manager there, preferred Robert Parker's style of wines. And so we would having that, us being stylistically different in what we liked, was a really good advantage, because we could sound off each other and go, if I knew the wine was very much in Flo's category camp, I would defer to him and say, Flo, what do you think of this wine? And he'll go, oh, yeah. And I go, okay, that's a nothing. Whoever goes, oh, yeah, that's really good. Okay, let's do it. There is that. There is the fact that we have different palates, we like different things, but the fundamentals, again, coming right back, cannot be forgotten about. Really good winemakers, trusted winemakers that have been doing it for a long time. I am a big fan of when a winery has had a winemaker for a long time, because they get to see the fruit coming in every year, different growing seasons every year. They get to mind map how things behave, what parts of their vineyard, or what vineyards, or what part of their vineyards perform better in which year. So when they come to blending their final wines, they can go, okay, yeah, that block there, we need to use all of that block, but we'll use very little of this block to make sure we get the best wine we possibly can. And other ones might say, okay, yeah, that this year is a cooler year, so we're using that site down there versus the site here by the winery. We use more of that than less of this. This stuff by the winery goes into the cheaper wine. That stuff is the top line. Could be reversed in a hot vintage. The stuff close to the vineyard, close to the winery, could be the best in warm vintage. But you don't know that until you've worked in the environment for years. You've got a feel for it. And again, the quality of the vineyards. Working out which is as consumers, we don't always know that, but we have to trust that producer, that even in the poorer years or the lesser years, they're still going to make really good wines. For instance, in 2023, you can't, while you can't make exceptional wines, you can still make very, very good wines, especially from early ripening varieties like some Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And so knowing that, likes of Martinborough, cyclone affected, but Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Ātarangi, you can back it in, because Helen Masters has been producing the wines there for years, decades. She knows the ins and outs of those vineyards, ins and outs of the fruit that's coming in. She's seen it all before, so she knows where to manipulate and how to manipulate it and what to use and which blends. So you trust that. Again, trusting the producer, buying the right vintages, shopping on the right vintages makes an exceptional wine. While you can still get exceptional wines in lesser vintages, it's better to buy in better vintages. And whilst the Real Review doesn't necessarily say this, that's all about the wine, not necessarily the year that wine was produced. They're just all about that consistency over a long period of time for that wine. So you can back it in any vintage, that wine is going to be good because of the producer. The producer has shown to be exceptional in what they do year in, year out. And so you back that in, you can back it in, they back it in, so you can back it in. And that's what this is a bit like. Wine is a journey. You got to find what works for you, especially when you're shopping for exceptional wines. You got to make sure you know those extra things. You know the producer, you know the vintage, you know what vintages are good, you know where the fruit comes from even, because if, let's say there was weather event at harvest time in Martinborough, right at harvest, maybe we'll just sidestep Martinborough as a whole for that year and move it. I toyed with the idea of, especially with Syrah, is going for Lionel's for the glass pool, going down south for a little bit and getting something from Waipara, and then moving back up north. I did that. I started that once the original Syrah couldn't get, rolled to the 23. I thought, okay, let's move down south. I got the Terrace Edge Syrah in, and then they won a trophy for the wine that we had on the list, and the wine raced and was gone. And so I had to find something else. I ended up finding another 2021, an exceptional vintage in Hawke's Bay, a Syrah from the Hawke's Bay 2021, and knowing that the 22, they didn't make their reserve. So I knew I had buffer time that I could get through use the 21 into the 22, which we're in 22 now, and the 22 is exceptional. And then, when they would release their 23, they're probably going to be on 24. And potentially I could then shift anyway, because there'd be a plethora of options in 24. So that was me trying to safeguard myself, so I didn't have to have 2023 wine by the glass, because you don't want to give a poorer impression of the wine as well. I am huge on making sure, also looking after the producer. There's no point in selling a wine that doesn't paint the right picture for the producer either. I tend to wonder if people should just dump the fruit that's just not good enough for them, dump it on the black market, get rid of it, and start again. Obviously, not everybody can do that because they don't have the cash flow to do that, but it is a really good practice if you want to hold on to the quality and that brand quality that you're looking for, because this is what this is about. At the end of the day, the quality of the brand. If you can back the quality of the brand in, you can back the quality of the wine. Hence why Bordeaux hasn't updated their classification, because you can back in that brand. You can know that they're producing great wine year in, year out. And that's what it comes down to. Exceptional wine, it's not about a one-off flash in the pan, oh wow, that was amazing. They have to consistently do it over many years and do it year in, year out, producing a high quality wine. That's when you know you can back that.
Thinking about Europe, Asia, or that once-in-a-lifetime adventure you've been dreaming about? Travel is happening right around the world, and now is a fantastic time to start planning. Picture yourself wandering through the streets of Paris, cruising the rivers of Europe, exploring the temples of Asia, or relaxing on a tropical beach in Bali. Whether you're looking to travel this year or take advantage of early bird specials for next year, Amanda and Anna from King Travel would love to help you bring those travel dreams to life. Book local, book with confidence. Visit kingtravel.co.nz.
Now, for our wine of the week, I'm going somewhere a little bit different today. Not necessarily somebody that would register in the Real Reviews exceptional category or what have you, as far as consistency and longevity of production goes. But I tried this wine recently and really, really enjoyed it. And it's not often I say this about this grape variety, because I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of this grape variety, but when a wine is good, it's good regardless of its variety. And this is, I bang the drum on this all the time, is that we need to try more wine, because just because you think you don't like Chardonnay or whatever doesn't mean you don't like every Chardonnay. And that's the same for this wine. It is the Landing Pinot Gris 2025. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Landing, it's actually up in the Bay of Islands. And, as I said, Pinot Gris doesn't really stand out to me, but this did. And that's why I thought it was appropriate for this episode, the fact that the wine was exceptional. The wines overall from the Landing are very, very good, very high quality. But this one caught me because the rest of them were Chardonnay, Syrah, Rosé, very good examples, but seen some very, very good examples this year of those styles. So for a Pinot Gris to be this good, it just really stood out to me. So the colour was a lovely sort of pale lemon yellow. And the nose is super perfumed, sort of blossom, pear, quince, sort of creamy lemon, almost like a lemon curd sort of note to it. There was, and then the palate was super fresh with that citrusy lemon coming through. And notice my notes, I said fresh again. It was really fresh, but rounded at the same time. That whole Pinot Gris aspect being softer and less acidic really came through. You got this rounded, soft phenolics, and then this lovely sort of savory spice and sort of character. And I was really struggling to pinpoint what that sort of savoriness was. And then it wasn't until I had tried one of the Chardonnays that I realized it's a rind, that pithy rind character, more that rind of the citrus, the orange of the lemon coming through that spice, and super Moorish on the finish. Just deliciously balanced and really fresh and smooth and balanced and just harmonious. Lovely wine, and again, has the energy. Quite often you have Pinot Gris and it lacks that energy, that lacks that punch, that drive, that zing, that zip that structured wines have, and this one had it, which I loved, and you think what you'd pair this with. I mean, ideal summer wine, have it with your salads, your charcuterie, your seafood, fresh seafood for sure. And, and don't worry about cellaring it too long, a couple of years, happy days. I mean, it's Pinot Gris, sure. Probably could get a little bit more out of it given its acidity and its freshness. And you could develop some richness to it, but the beauty of this wine is its freshness, is its zing, its zest, its zip, As far as the score goes, this was an easy one for me. It's 95 out of 100. Yeah, really classy wine, loved it. And yeah, I look forward to actually, coming summertime when we expand the wine list out at Lionel's, is showcasing Northland Pinot Gris. So yeah, that's the end of the episode. Just really, if you are interested in exceptional wines, do homework, check out the Real Reviews, subscribe to them. I mean, I'm not trying to promote them over this, not a paid advertorial, but, get that experience, that knowledge behind you, that knowledge base, so you can make those educated decisions, so that when you do want to spend top dollar on a wine, you're not getting the wool pulled over your eyes. It's not just like, oh yeah, this is a great wine because it's this price. It's actually worth that. So that's a really big thing when exceptional wine, when it comes to the consumer, you have to be able to back it in, and it still has to be value. So yeah. As always, thank you for joining us. Santé Borak.